and I'm glad to have the opportunity to propose this motion and move it on the floor of the Dáil this evening in my own and that of my Labour Party colleagues, which is dealing with the question of the national minimum wage, reaffirms the Labour Party's long-standing commitment, which is unequivocal and unambiguous, that we will not implement any reduction in the minimum wage. That if the legislation under which the Government has proposed to cut the national minimum wage, and more particularly as set out in Section 13 of the Financial Emergency Measures in the Public Interest No. 2 Bill 2010 is passed and enacted, that we will reverse this particular measure, which affects 11.6% reduction in the minimum wage rate from €8.65 down to €7.65 per hour, or in excess of €2,000 per year, as enacted under Section 13 of the Financial Emergency Bill, as referred to above, if we are part of any future government.
We don't actually have a minister present.
I'm astounded by this, because this is.
So if the deputy would just, we'll give him injury time if you just wait.
Well, I'd like to have full injury time.
Absolutely. The Minister, now that we have a Minister, we will commence the debate again. I call on Deputy Willie Penrose to.
I have formally moved the motion in the name of myself and my Labour Party colleagues this evening, which is dealing with the question of the national minimum wage. And I reaffirm the Labour Party's long-standing commitment, which is unequivocal and unambiguous, that we will not implement any reduction in the minimum wage. Indeed, it is low enough. And that if legislation under which the Government has proposed a cut in the national minimum wage, which was Section 13 of the Financial Emergency Measures in the Public Interest No. 2 Bill 2010 is passed and enacted, that we will reverse this particular measure, which affects an 11.6% reduction in the minimum wage from the rate of €8.65 per hour to €7.65 per hour, or in excess of €2,000 per year, if it comes into being as proposed under Section 13 of the Financial Emergency Bill, which I referred to above. That is a commitment that we have given and we will give if we are part of any future government. If in the event that the necessary commencement order is not in place, our commitment is then simple. We will not bring forward a commencement order to allow the provision of Section 13 to take effect. I don't think we can be any clearer in our commitment in this regard. And for those people who doubt us, I think it's time now that they started to believe our words as set out in this point and in this motion here tonight. I think that the strength of the Labour Party's conviction in this regard can be gauged in the fact that, notwithstanding that we debate this matter on Thursday and Friday in the floor of the Dáil, we're back here tonight with a very clear and comprehensive motion that deals with all aspects of this important issue. Cutting the minimum wage makes no sense at any level, and indeed I think it's under the guise of dismantling barriers to employment the Government claims that a cut in the minimum wage will ensure the viability of small and medium enterprises and will support job creation in these sectors where significant job loss have occurred. But if a closer look at the actual sectors where the minimum wage is paid might well tell them that in these sectors there is a process of significant contraction. And indeed, their own reports that are available from Government indicate that it will be difficult to create jobs in these industries over future years, and that the problem of survival in these sectors is one of oversupply in the markets. But what is very important from our perspective is the national minimum wage is a floor, not a comfortable standard of living. And to put it in context, the national minimum wage is only 45%, Alaskan Cora, of average earnings in the private sector. And it's just over half of the manual, production, sales and clerical officers' hourly earnings in the second quarter of 2010. So let's get the full truth, let's ventilate the facts, let's articulate the reasons that the Government are putting forward, and let's rebut them one by one, which I intend, and indeed my Labour Party colleagues, Deputy Brew, Deputy Lynch and others who will speak in this debate in the course of this, the next 2 nights. Cutting the minimum wage makes no sense at any level. It undermines, as I said, the social floor, and it is proof positive that the least well-off and most vulnerable are fair game as far as this Government is concerned. The minimum wage is one of a number of false explanations in relation to our current economic crisis, intended to deflect attention from the banks and the Government mismanagement. The Government's claim that the Irish minimum wage is the highest in the EU is misleading, as I will show in the course of my contribution. It should be noted that in countries where lower minimum wages, workers have access to excellent free medical care and cheap public transport, which improves their standards of living. It is likewise misleading to say that the budget leaves those on a minimum wage outside the tax net. Whilst they may not pay any income tax, they pay very high taxes on goods and services and user charges. And the regressive universal social charge, which was pointed out by Party Leader Eamon Gilmore on the floor of the Dáil here last Wednesday, and which, taken together with the reduction of €1 per hour in the rate, will reduce their weekly wage by up to €44 per week. Now, over 60% of workers on the minimum wage are women, and many will no longer find it worthwhile to enter the workforce, which is contrary to the policy of encouraging women to do so, and which was specifically alluded to in the 4-year plan. Reducing the minimum wage will do little to improve competitiveness, as most workers on the minimum wage are not in exporting industries. Evidence from the USA shows that states with a minimum wage have lower unemployment than those that do not. If there is no worthwhile minimum wage, there is no incentive for employers to train workers or for workers to stay long enough to acquire skills. The result is higher labour turnover and lower productivity. Reducing the minimum wage will lead to the creation of a large number of working poor, as in the USA, where almost 20% of the labour force must have 2 or more jobs to survive, with negative effects on family life and social cohesion. It is clear that the net effect of reducing the minimum wage will be a reduction in the incentive to take up low-paid jobs and result ultimately in higher social welfare costs. The most likely response of employers to the reduction of minimum wage will be to cut the wages of their workers. The assurance the Minister gave to workers that employers will not cut their wage does not stack up. These assurances are either naive or cynical. They are certainly not based on a realistic assessment of the likely actions of employers. With a handful of honourable exceptions, employers will not be able to resist reducing existing wages, and the Minister has created more fear and uncertainty among workers. The National Employment Rights Authority has recovered literally millions from employers who defy the law and refuse to pay the minimum wage, and this cut will be a bonanza for them. Other employers will be emboldened by the cut and will simply reduce the wage of the workforce by diktat to the lower rate, and with the threat of Nero now removed, the workers will be powerless to defend their wages. More cynical employers will ask the workforce to agree to the cut, making them an offer they can't refuse for fear of losing their jobs. And other employers will do exactly that. They will cook up excuses to justify their dismissing their existing workforce so they can replace them with cheaper workers on a lower minimum wage. To ensure that workers were protected from these type of actions by unscrupulous employers, I put forward an amendment in the Labour Party last Friday that aimed to protect the existing situation of workers. It was indicating that the amendment to national minimum wage, affected by Section 13, would not affect any right, privilege, obligation or liability acquired, accrued or incurred under the Act or under any contract of employment entered into before the coming into operation of the Act, that's the 2010 Act, and to which the Act applied. It had the distinction of being widely agreed and argued for by Fianna Fáil and Green deputies, but it was still voted against. And as Deputy Shorter said, shame on every deputy who knows that protection is needed but refused to support the Labour Party amendment. The legislation that will cut the minimum wage has another sting in the tail. It allows the Minister to change the amount that employers can deduct from wages in respect of board and lodging. The current situation is that if the employee is given bed and board as part of their employment, the employer can deduct this from their minimum wage. The deduction must be fair and reasonable, not just a sandwich at lunchtime, and it must be stated in the employee's contract of employment, and the employee must be given written notice of the deduction. The maximum that can be deducted is set out in Statute Instrument number 95 of 2000 and is currently full board and lodging €50.13 a day, or $7.73 per week, or $70.73 per day. Full board only €32.14 a week, or €4.60 per day. Lodgings only €21.85 per week, or €3.14 per day. The fear is that employers will use this provision to further reduce workers' wages. The European Court of Justice has previously ruled that the cost of board and lodgings cannot reduce minimum wages. The Minister should, therefore, in accordance with the ECJ ruling, use his order to rule that board and lodging cannot be charged against minimum wages. And in addition, he should reduce significantly the amount that can be charged for board and lodging. After all, the logic of the government for reducing minimum wages is that there has been a decrease in the cost of living. The minimum wage cut is a massive transfer from the poorest paid workers to their employers. It could take as much as €150 million out of the economy and over €2,000 from the pockets of workers every year. And the €150 million is based on 75,000 workers on minimum wage cut of 2,000 annually. And if half the employers are implemented, then it would be 75 million. At a time when working families are struggling every day to make ends meet, to put food on the table, they're being hit with 3 cuts: a cut in the minimum wage, a cut in child benefit and a cut in social welfare. Cutting minimum wage is counterproductive, Minister, as it will destroy jobs and damage consumer spending. The cut, as I said, represents a possible reduction in as much as 150 million, and this is all the more pointless when we know that it's the lower wage earners who spend proportionally more in their local area and have a higher margin propensity to spend. Their margin propensity to save is very limited. They're down at 1%, whereas in the last 2 years it has exploded from the normal 4.5 to 5% up to 12 and 13%. The Minister has presented a minimum wage cut as some sort of job stimulus, and it is unfair and cruel to demand that low-paid working people should subsidise their own employment. And it won't work, as the impact of removing so much money from the local and real economy of shops and services will be the destruction of even more jobs. The majority of employers will simply pocket the savings. It is equally unlikely that employers will pass on the wage cut to customers. However, even if they did, it is minimal. For example, a wage cut in the hospitality sector of €1 per hour is equivalent of a reduction of about 61 cents in the cost of meal costing €60 or more. Therefore, it is unlikely to have any great real effect on demand. Big business will benefit more from the cut to minimum wage. For example, if you're an employer with 10 employees, you make €400 a week from the minimum wage cut, whereas an employer with 100 employees would make €4,000 a week. This will advantage large employers more, increase their ability to undercut small business and destroy yet more local jobs. Now, the minimum wage cut we have argued here on behalf of the Labour Party, all our people who have spoken of this, does nothing to improve the public finances. In fact, the cuts to reduce the income to the state from the universal service charge, increasing the level of payments from family income supplement. And indeed, I see there where the government in their motion has indicated that having the family income supplement is great, and it's a very important floor for people. But I mean, I never thought the family income supplement was there to supplement employers indirectly, because that's what this is tantamount to. So, I think basically cutting minimum wages will actually take more money away from the public finances and from the public purse. And I think this is circuitous thinking that has got us into trouble already. There's no justification for a unilateral across-the-board cut in the national minimum wage, and the Minister's approach is based on a series of myths. The Irish minimum wage is not the highest in Europe. In fact, the Minister for Labour has stated that it's the 6th, but this disguises the reality. In real terms, those earning the national minimum wage since the time of the last increase in July 2007 are worse off by almost 2.7% now compared to the position in July 2007. And however, this is to ignore the fact that has elucidated by my colleague Deputy Pat Rabbitte on numerous occasions, that in 2007 prices had reached an all-time high in this economy. Therefore, as well as making comparisons with other member states in relation to the minimum wage rate, we have also, in order to validate this exercise and ensure that it is accurate in all respects, make comparisons with those other member states in relation to the cost of living that's applicable in each of those member states. Then we have a true measure of the wage that's involved in this regard. Bus fares here have increased by 22% since 2007. Cost of ESB is up by 2.2%. Local authority rents are up by 21.5%. Bread is up by 12.5%. Milk is up by 19%. And you're asking those people on the minimum wage of $8.65 who are trying to pay those bills and trying to pay for all those costs and saying that there's no increase since 2007 in the rates. Nevertheless, a whole cohort of basic necessities that make up the food parcel and are very important in the context of the CPI measure are parked in there and they have significant increases. Minister, there's already a mechanism in place under Section 41 of the National Minimum Wage Act 2000 that allows employers who have difficulty meeting the minimum wage to apply for a reduction under a claim of inability to pay. If the rate that the minimum wage is paid at was a problem that the Minister is making it out to be, then it would be realistic to expect that there would be a long queue of employers at the door of the Labour Court. But the fact is that no employer has made an application in respect of their inability to pay at this point in time. I think, Minister, it's a case of don't waste a good crisis. At $8.65, The Irish minimum wage is not the highest in Europe, and as I said, according to the Minister for Labour himself, it is 6th. And well-informed other sources, such as the Irish Congress of Trade Unions, rate it at 9th. There is already a lower starting rate of $7.79 for adults, highlighting just how unnecessary a unilateral across-the-board cut of minimum wage is. The existing lower rate is €6.06 for under 18, €6.92 for first-year adult, and $7.79 for the second-year adult. Therefore, rates significantly lower than $8.65 are already built in to the existing minimum wage regime. There is a sting in the tail. The new minimum wage rates will be as low as $5.36 for under 18s and $6.12 for first-year adults. This arguably, as I said, impacts disproportionately women, young people and migrant workers. In the hospitality industry, 25% are on the minimum wage in the retail sector. 12% are on the 25% on the minimum wage in the hospitality sector, 12% of the retail sector are on the minimum wage. And these are sectors where women and migrant workers dominate. So when it comes to the first in line to be kicked by this government, it's a case of women and children first. I question the legal underpinning for this approach. The whole wage-cutting exercise is contrary to the approved wage-setting mechanisms established by the International Labour Organisation, sister organisation to the IMF, IMF have confirmed that they have not sought this reduction. A minister of this government, Mr John Gormley, went on the public record to confirm that a cut in the national minimum wage was insisted upon by the EU Commission. The National Recovery Plan 2011-2014 contains a provision requiring consultation with the Commission about low sectoral wage setting mechanisms. How is this intervention by the Commission consistent with the objectives for social inclusion set out in Article 3 of the Lisbon Treaty? Pay policy is not an EU competence, so how can the Commission be involved in these issues? We in the Labour Party see this cut in the minimum wage as mean-spirited and counterproductive. All it does is inflict hardship on a significant number of people and households who rely on minimum wage employment, and as it says, will act as a disincentive to work. Minister, also in terms of the national minimum wage, those people have not been immune to the fiscal adjustment. As I said, in real terms, those in the national minimum wage since the time of the last increase in July 2007 are worse off by 2.7% now compared to the position in July 2007. And you see, they were also, the income levy imposed a de facto cut of 2%. And as I said, consumer prices excluding mortgage interest are now 0.7% higher than they were in July 2007. So the other point about it is that in terms, relative to our trading partners, Ireland's national minimum wage is actually lower than the UK, Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg and France. And that is very important in terms of national purchasing power of the national minimum wage in competitor EU countries. Ireland does rank 6th and, as I said, drops behind Netherlands, Luxembourg, Belgium, France and the UK. So expressed in terms of the prevailing cost of living in each country, the purchasing power of the UK's minimum rate amounts to €7.33 compared to €6.78 for Ireland. And that was valid there in January 2010. And notwithstanding a significant fall in consumer prices in Ireland this year, the cost of living remained 34% dearer than in the UK in 2009 due to a combination of a fall in UK consumer prices and depreciation of sterling during 2009. Over the course of 2010, this differential is likely to have narrowed due to UK inflation running at 3.2% in October and Irish inflation running at just 0.7%, along with a strengthening of sterling. But the UK rate is still expected in purchasing terms to be higher than that in Ireland, due to a 2.2% increase in the UK national minimum wage rate in October 2010, bringing the rate to £5 sterling 93, or €6.97 in nominal terms. So, I mean, the impact of cutting the rate reduce the cost of services? The impact of the national minimum wage rate on the cost of service of the Irish economy is grossly exaggerated. Just 5.1% of those employed in private sector services of the Irish economy were earning the national minimum wage as of the second quarter of 2010. And while there are a larger number of workers receiving sectoral wages levels that are calculated as a premium over the statutory minimum wage, just 1/4 of the total basket of goods and services made up of services regulated by those our EROs and REAs.
1 minute.
I just want to conclude by saying that in the context of the motion, that the Labour Party the Labour Party is strongly of the belief that there has to be a reaffirmation and a confirmation that a statutory minimum wage that is there at present is the very minimum and is a statement of the core values of the country. It's a statement of what the Labour Party believes is a core value. Provides a threshold of decency under which society agrees that worker wages should not fall, and that a reduction would signal a race to the bottom, in which everyone, low-wage workers, public and private sector workers, social welfare claimants and pensioners will suffer. We will not condone that, and as I said, at the first opportunity, if this legislation is implemented and becomes effective, we will reverse it. If it is not and requires a commencement order to ensure that its work that operates, we will not bring into play or bring into operation the relevant and necessary commencement order. That is a clear and unambiguous commitment of the Labour Party, and we feel that everybody in this House who has the good of working class people and people who work in those employments, and particularly the 60% of those people who are women who are working in the minimum wage environment, should support.